Hi and welcome to Back to the Tactics Board. In today's episode we're looking at defending corners and principally the pros and cons of zonal defending and man-to-man marking. I thought a good starting point would be to give you two opinions from two ex-England internationals. It's the pundits Jamie Carragher and Gary Neville from Sky Sports. I'm sure you're all aware of them. And they were having a debate about defending corners and whether you should go with zonal defending or man-to-man marking, and they had different views. Jamie Carragher mentions, "I'm sick of hearing people talking about zonal marking. I hear the same thing every time the ball goes in. But when the same goal goes in against man marking, we don't blame the system, we blame the player. I did zonal marking under Rafael Benitez. I like to think I've got some understanding of it." He goes on, "That's the problem with man marking. You're not even looking at the ball because you're so obsessed with your man. There's for and against for both of them, but this is the problem with man marking. People don't watch the ball. Why is it that people won't blame man marking as a system? Because it's easier to say, oh, it's his fault, so it's okay. But you still conceded a goal, no matter what the system." You can see Carragher there is firmly in the zonal defending camp, and he makes some valid points which I'll touch on in this video. An alternative opinion then comes from Gary Neville, who was used to doing man-to-man marking it during his time with United. I'm not a fan of zonal marking because what you're asking for is instinctive thinking at different moments in the match, depending on where people stand. You're asking players to think for themselves and make decisions. You talk about leaders, people who can command and organise the box. We know there's a lack of them. Interesting he says that one there, because we all want to get players that think for themselves, but sometimes in the drive for a good performance or a result, we almost feel we have to step in and think for them. But Gary Neville here is talking about the professional game, where more important than that individual player's development, far more important is this short term for that manager who might get sacked if they don't win, is making sure the instructions are carried out correctly. So whether that one translates to grassroots, it'd be up for debate. But Gary Neville continues here anyway. "Zonal marking needs coaching, hours on the training pitch. I never did it, so maybe that's why I'm biased against it. But my view would be that accountability and simplicity are important." And that one probably is more relatable to grassroots, in that do you have hours to spend on the training ground to do zonal marking practice and work on it and perfect it? I felt those two quotes were a good way to start this video and kind of get the ball rolling on some of the pros and cons of each. Some of the key questions when you're marking them, well, who marks who? Are you looking at kind of height for height? So your tallest players mark their tallest players. Are you looking for your strongest header of the ball, who might be your tallest player, might not be? Are you looking at positional? So do you tell your centre-backs, for example, to mark the opposition centre-backs? Or do you say that if your striker is quite strong in the air and their centre-back comes in for the corner, that player follows in with him, and that your centre-back carries on marking the opposition forward? Do you want completely man-to-man marking? Because you might be saying, yes, that I don't do zonal, never will. But if you have a player or two players on the posts, you're kind of doing zonal marking to an extent as well as man-to-man, because they're marking a zone. So you'd be considering that as well. If they put a player on the goalkeeper to get under the goalkeeper's feet, do you put a player marking them? Do you take a player off a post and have that player trying to protect your goalkeeper and keep that player out of the way? Or do you trust your keeper to deal with it on their own? And you say, you know what, that frees up a player somewhere else. How many players do you want to keep out of the box? Because the more players you just bring straight in straight away, that can also mean that they get tracked in. So if 7 just comes straight into the box, 6 might say, well, I'm coming in too for the battle, and it gets very congested around this area. So you've got to be considering that too. Calling a bit of a bluff and keeping a few players out can be a way of freeing up space in there for your strongest headers of the ball. As Carragher said in that quote I shared, if you're man-to-man marking, your priority is your man more than the ball. You've got to make sure that player doesn't get the run on you. So if this player runs around here, this player's trying to track that, they will temporarily lose sight of the ball, most likely. So this is a risk with man-to-man marking. You know, you're trying to do two things at once: watch your opponent and watch an incoming ball. So if you do it like the England team had a while where they set up in a line which really challenges man-to-man marking. So this player pulls off this way, this player pulls off this way. How do the players pick up the person they're marking? That can really kind of make it difficult for them. Let's just imagine this situation: the ball comes in and it's cleared out into this area here. 2 gets onto the ball first. What are the roles and responsibilities of your players then? We talked about this in the general questions one, so I won't say too much on it, but essentially, do players carry on marking their opposite number in the box in here as they're coming out, or is it a case of no, the deepest players get the back line up quickly to the edge of the box area, and almost then all of a sudden you're marking the space, trying to regain a bit of kind of a formation to yourselves. So a bit of a plan for second balls, for clearances, how you move up behind that clearance and prepare potentially for another ball coming into the box. Some of the key strengths with man-to-man marking, well, I'd say one of them is it's quite straightforward. You know, you're saying, for example, to your 8 and 10, you're saying you are marking the opposition midfielders in the box. We think you're a good matchup, mark them. That's your job on corners. So there's no where do I stand. It's, well, if your midfielder comes in, you're marking them. And it's the same here. If their centre-backs come in, our centre-backs here, the Reds, know that that's who they're marking. And that's all they'll be on for the game, you know, or at least until you tell them otherwise. So communication will be pretty key. But if you're good at it, it's straightforward. That's who you're marking. Follow that person through to the end of that phase of play. Another good thing from a coaching point of view can be that it can be clear for accountability. So if number 4 scores and you've said your red number 5 was marking their number 4 before the game, they score, there's a fair chance that 5 could have done something better. You know, there could have been some misfortune, there could have been a foul and all that, but at least you've got some clarity. The number 4 scored, 5's job is to mark them, the conversation can take place, what happened there. So with that idea of straightforward and accountability, which Gary Neville alluded to, particularly you can see why with grassroots football, that's key, really, because if you've not got as much time to spend on the training ground, it's going to have to be quite a straightforward setup you have. Some of the potential weaknesses of man-to-man marking then, well, the first one is because a lot of players are tracking runners and there's a lot of movement going on in the box. All that crossing over and movement can cause chaos in the box. And if the delivery is a good one, then you might find that your players are tripping over each other to get to the ball. Can also leave an area unprotected, and all of a sudden there's a big space here. Now, you might say, that's fine, we're marking man-to-man, but it can just take them the time of run, gets on that front foot ahead of your player, and they get an easy opportunity to score. So just having that space to run into for everyone, even if you know they're going to do it, if you're marking tight and 4 makes a good double movement, gets in there, they might just get the edge on your player and they win that ball. So this can be a real weakness for man-to-man marking. You're spending all your time looking at the player and not the ball, and at the end of the day, it's the ball that's going to get put in the back of the net, not the opponent, hopefully. See an example here then of man-to-man marking in a game here. Ball taken from the left side here, and we're in a man-to-man system. Just a few things. You'll see the player marks in yellow here. They're not responsible for a player, they are responsible for a zone. So you see there is a slight mixture, just like if you have players on the posts, you are effectively doing some zonal marking. This player is responsible for the front. The reason the front can be a real danger is if the keeper comes into their area and they don't get there first, they don't win the ball, then the whole of the goal is open for a shot. It can be just a tap in, any kind of weight on target, it's going to be a goal. So the keeper needs to be able to give this area over to outfield players. So we've got a player there, then we have a player protecting the goalkeeper. That is something, again, sometimes you do see teams, they'll leave this area for the goalkeeper, depending on what the opposition forward is like. At this level here, the player here could be very good at putting the goalkeeper off, getting under their feet. So we've got a protector here, basically, a player marking there. And then you see you've got little man-to-man battles around them. And we have one player, this big area here. They may well be responsible for anyone that comes into this area, but you can see they're more zonal right now, and this is because there's a player over here. And if the ball gets played short, this player's responsibility will be to get out there and put some pressure on the ball. They'll also be in charge of short ones as well. You can see here a little example of man-to-man marking where it can be a challenge. The players are trying to do that because the two of the greens are working together. The player at the back here can maybe lose the player that's marking them, whichever one of it is of these two. I would say this player's trying to mark here, but this player's trying to screen and get in the way of them. And this player, if they're not careful, will lose the run on their opponent. And because there's a big space here, and there's enough space here to get to it first and flick it on, and all it takes then is a player here, for example, to move off the back, flick on, and the ball can be put away because there's a big area to attack. If these players defending are really good at winning their one-on-one battles, this can work really well. And the majority of times, it's in their favour because the team in blue and white here can aim for anywhere in the world other than their goal. to clear it, whereas the greens are aiming for this target, as we know. I'm simplifying it there, but that's the difference. So the odds are massively stacked in the favour of the defending team. Interesting picture here is Barcelona when they had Martino as the manager. As I'll show you later, Barcelona under Guardiola, during that amazing golden phase in their history, played zonal. But you can see Martino did things differently. They did man-to-man here, so let's have a little look at that and compare it to the last one. You can see 4-on-4 in here, player on the edge being responsible for the player on the edge here, one player trying to be on the edge, probably covering anything that comes around this area, and also for counter-attacks. But generally speaking, kind of similar. A player responsible for the front area, giving the keeper more license to be in charge of the back end area of the area, and everyone else is in those one-to-ones. It's a one-to-one challenge. Who wins the battles? Now let's look at zonal marking and some of the aspects of that. Well, if we look first of all at some of the general questions, who covers which zone and which zones are you trying to cover? Who'd be responsible for which box? Are you confident your goalkeeper is responsible for most of the 6-yard box, particularly the back end part of that if you have a player at the front? Are you looking for players to be responsible for outside the 6-yard box? And so you can think of it in terms of that. You'd expect there to be more zones and smaller nearer to the goal, just because they'll be kind of key areas for an opponent to score from. Scoreable range, very dangerous area, vulnerable potentially if you don't zone it well. If I've got players in this kind of slightly diagonal line, zonal marking, then what do I want strengths wise of these players at the front of that zone? Because if the players come in there, the ball's either going to be lower or it's whipped in at more pace. Where it's getting to the back, it's going to have to beat these first set of players in the air. It's going to have to be higher, maybe more looped in the air. So you're thinking these front players here, are they going to need to be agile, good at timing the actual header? So they might not be the tallest player here, but they're good at timing it. They're good at getting there first. They're quick on their feet. Whereas as you go towards the mid and then the back zone, if that ball's looped in the air and your players are zonal, so they're not moving onto the ball with as much distance, are they going to be strong enough in the air? Are they tall enough? Have they got a good jump on them? As it's cleared, do the players come out, in a measured way, or is it whoever can get out fastest gets out fastest? Do you want these three players in these like mid zones here to be charging the ball, or at least getting out quicker? And one of the beauties here of the zonal system is your back line there as it is now. Those 5 players can come up as a line and be looking for offsides as balls get played back in. Some of the potential issues you might have with zonal then. I'd say first of all, more preparation is needed in training for your players to understand. 3, for example, might be in this box here, but where does their box start and finish? Where do they start as the ball's about to be kicked, and where are they finishing up? Do you want them at the back end part of their zone that they're responsible for? So if the ball's played in front, they can move forward, which is easier to do than to move backwards. Where's the crossover between 5 and 3? Where's the crossover between 8 and 3 in this situation as well? So for 3, for example, can you give them some visual markers that they'll know that's where their zone starts and ends and how wide and deep it is and so on? When does 5 become responsible? If a player manages to get in between 5 and 3, how do you deal with that? But that links to that accountability idea, though. I'm looking there at accountability. If a player scores from here, is it their fault or their fault? Well, it'd be the system's fault, wouldn't it? And you conceded. If it was man-to-man, then you might say if number 5's man scores, it's 5's fault. You've still conceded a goal, which is what Carragher was saying in that quote I showed you earlier. The key thing is we don't want to concede. So it's not about whose fault it was, it's that we've conceded. Can we make this area stronger next time between number 5 and number 3? You can use some visuals. You've got the 6-yard line box, you've got the front post, the back post, the penalty spot. So you can have some basic ideas of visuals to give the players, you're responsible number 2, all the way up to the back end of the 6-yard box. By doing that, and because you're marking your zone, you're not following a player around, there could be gaps then left. The player can come into here and because no one thinks they're responsible for this zone, they don't come out to it. The ball here could be a danger. You see quite a few times that teams will exploit the gaps at the front between the first 2 players or even ahead of the first player. Try and get a flick on and send it into there. So you're prioritising this area, yes you are. But are there any spaces in here which an opponent could then overload and launch to the back with free headers from there? If 6 is getting the run on number 2 or number 6, making a big run into here, and that's where they're aiming for. And 2 and 6 are flat-footed. Even if they're tall, strong in the air, they're going to struggle to deal with it because 6 has got the run on them. So it's all about the idea that if this is where the ball's coming and this is where it's going to be when it's meetable, are 2 and 6 ready for that? Did 2 start at the back end of their zone, and as they saw where the ball was moving to, they moved onto that ball. They moved onto it, didn't just stand flat-footed and jump straight in the air. So all these things kind of just play into that idea that you need preparation time to work at this. And if you're not prepared to spend that hour or 2 you have a training per week on defending corners, which might not be the most popular theme or topic for your players, then you'd say maybe, is it worth us doing this? Because we have to spend some time to get it right. If we don't get it right, we'll concede goals and then it'll be all the systems to blame, it's not working, and then you'll feel that as a coach, the responsibility of that. Some of the real strengths though, it's guaranteed to cover all key areas. So unlike man-to-man marking, where if I moved all these red players out and they were all marking a player and tracking them around the pitch, then all of a sudden it could be a situation where these key areas are open for whoever can get there first. Now, we were saying before with Zonal that it might be they get the run on you. Well, now they get more than the run on you. They've got complete open space or into no obstacles whatsoever. Whereas in your Zonal system, if you set it up smartly, you can make running lanes for players really difficult to find by having your players staggered around that 18-yard box in key areas. You give no one a free run onto the ball. It can also mean less communication is needed mid-game. If you do get a chance to work on this at training and the players know which zone is theirs, then it's not every single corner, I'm on this person, I'm on this person, or spending a while working out which man-to-man matchup you're going to do, which is a lot of responsibility and can be difficult because you've not got any analysis on the opponents till you actually see them playing. Then this can really help with that. It can kind of make it much simpler that number 3, you're responsible for this area, no matter what the opponent does. Number 8, you're responsible for this area here, no matter what the opposition have or try and do. Players can focus more on the ball than the opposition player. Yes, they'll be aware of an opposition player coming into their zone, but if they really make a point of, I'm going to meet that ball, so wherever it comes in this area, it's 3s, it's 5, 6, 4, 2, they have responsibility. It comes around here, 8, 10, 7, and they're aware that when it comes to my zone, if it does, I'm going to be there first, then that can be quite a good thing for just keeping it really clear, lots of clarity. So if player for player, the opposition are taller, strong, physically stronger, they're just better in the air. It's their game to win the ball in the air. This becomes less about one-on-ones and more about a unit working together. So between these players, can they just shut down the spaces? They're covering so many. You've got 8 players all in this area from your own team. Then the opposition sending players in. There's not actually a lot of space to run onto the ball. So you're almost suffocating their space. And even though they may be good in the air, to get a clean winner when there's so many players under your feet would be difficult. Also, though, you can have this thing that whilst you're blocking off a lot of running lanes for your team who are not needing to move as much to find the space, they've got their space, it can actually make it much easier not to get in each other's way. And it can be really good for transition in a man-to-man marking situation where the players can be spread out all over the place in different places every single corner, depending on the movement of 5, for example. If 10 is man marking them on one transition, the ball gets cleared, and 10 is your most advanced player. Next time 5 goes in here in a man-to-man marking, the ball's cleared, and 7 or 8 are your most advanced players. Are they getting after the ball? Is that their main strength? Are they good at that? Are they slow to react? So what you do with a zonal system is you say in transition, you've won the ball back, or not even transition, you just cleared the ball into here. You've got this shape. You know that'll be your shape whenever the ball gets cleared. This line of players know they'll be the line. They are the line, and if they all move out together, they know that 9, if the ball gets played into them from here, will be offside. So it can take away some of the uncertainty of how you deal with a clearance from a corner, because the players will be in that same position each time. I think as well, you look at it, if you're bursting out from these positions, it's also quite a useful position as well. If the ball gets cleared out here and 7 straight after it in this direction, 10 straight out here, they can get out after that ball a lot quicker and potentially set up a counter-attack from a zonal marking system. Another thing we should just consider then is when you can have a mixture of the two, of marking and zonal. So for example, you could have these 5 here doing their zonal, and then you can say to the players here, you're responsible for actually picking up their 3 strongest headers of the ball, which could be these 3, and you are going to mark them, and that'll be your role. I think it'd be fair to say that in zonal marking, you're more likely to need more players. If you're marking zones, you're going to need more players in those zones. Where in man-to-man, if they only put 3 players in the box, you might only put 3 defenders in there, maybe 4. So you've got this idea that zonal might take up more defenders, but that then takes up more space and can make it harder for opponents to get to the ball. If you're doing a mixture of zonal and marking, again, I'd say you're going to need more personnel in there, because you've got your players covering those key zones here. For example, you might have 3 players marking men here. You might even bring all your players back. You see plenty of teams doing that and saying, yeah, we're just saying, how often do you actually counter-attack from a corner? Occasionally. It's not that often it comes off because it's such a long way to get off the pitch. So it might be you bring all players back in there. You now have 4 players marking up. That might then bring more players in. They might indeed, but you're covering these 5 areas. You've got 4 players marking their 4 strongest head of the ball. The only thing could then be a bit of confusion if players get mixed up between whose job is which. They're playing zonal. Does 7 know to track 6, or do they just let them go? Maybe you want to let them go, but does 2 know about that? Is 2 thinking, I'm going to get to the front of my zone, and then 6 steals into the back? So you would need good communication. So what can this can mean is you're not only covering those zones really well, but you're making sure that, just in case, their strongest headers of the ball are not getting a free run on you, they're not getting lots of space to run at. You're kind of covering both bases. So it can be a nice mix to have this hybrid of zonal and man-to-man. You see quite a few teams doing that. Doing this mixture could really suit a broad range of players. So you might have three players that are just great in one-on-ones in defending. They're great at winning those battles. But then you have other players that just do not like those battles, and they're going to lose them. I'd say as well, for young players, doing this mixture could be interesting for their development, because if you just do man-to-man marking or you just do zonal marking, when that player goes to another coach or when things change in the future, they're playing somewhere else and they've got no experience of zonal marking and the new coach wants it, they're going to struggle. So I can see some strengths for player development that you do a mixture of both. You could cause some conflict between the 2 styles trying to merge them. One thing that could happen is that then you could have 2 players could then double up on one of the markers, and they could outnumber your markers in this area here, and 10 gets in 7's way, 6 gets off the back of them, and they get a free header here. 7 was trying to do their marking job, just get outnumbered, and because 2 was doing a zone, they didn't leave and help out, they stayed in their zone. That could be a little weakness potentially. You're going to need probably most of your players back in the box, so you haven't really got an outlet when it gets cleared. Now, before I was showing you how Barcelona under Martino did man-to-man marking, they did away with zonal, but when Guardiola was in charge there, you'll see here, Barcelona was the shortest team in Europe. And Guardiola looked at that and thought, right, we're just not going to win one-on-one battles. If we do man-to-man, we're going to suffer. And they went with a zonal defence instead. And it's taken from this brilliant book by Tersis, who analysed Barcelona over a long period of time, and he did an attacking version of this book, and this is the defensive side of it. Great read, really informative. This is one of the pages then from it where you see an example of how Barcelona used to have this zonal defence for defending corners. They'd have 4 across the 6-yard, 3 outside as a little triangle here, with 3 outside and like a bigger triangle ready for transitions, for balls to either edge of the box, and try and break out from there. Xavi, one of the smaller players in the team, was responsible for the front area here, so it wasn't about being tall there, it was just about being aware, being alert to any earlier balls that came in, and Xavi was definitely that. And then your stronger players in the air, your Puyol and your Piqué, would be responsible for these key strength areas here where they had to win those headers, win those battles. Let's look at an example of Liverpool as well then, doing a zonal defence. And they've got this slight diagonal so that the player at the front is nearest to the goal line. More space is at the back. Again, the goalkeeper taking much more responsibility for this area. We've got the 4 and the 3, an extra player in there making a bit of a diamond. There's not any clear spaces to run into, no clear running lanes for the opponent to really drive in there. They've got a player responsible for short ones, a backup player there, anything around this area, but also for breaking out from here as well. And here's from another game in that zonal again. This time they have a line of 5. Look at the difference in depth as well, from your front player going all the way to the back, further away from the goal line. So there does seem to be a pattern there. The player that's circling in red ends up scoring, and they score around this front area here. They get the run. Now, this is the thing here with zonal. These players, are they marking? It looks like they are here. Are they screening and blocking? Are they trying to block off runs? Well, this player has no one screening their run. And so, because of that, they actually steal a run and get onto the ball first. there's always going to be weaknesses in systems, just like in a man-to-man situation, this player may have won anyway. But that is something to consider. What are the players doing in the second line of the zone? Are they marking? Are they blocking, screening? Are they doing a zone? You can see that every Liverpool player in this is in their own area, every single player. And an example here is not actually from a corner, it's actually from a free kick. But we have a very, very similar situation because of the area the free kick is in. And you can see here they've got this system again, this zonal system, 5 players lined up with the first player nearest to the goal and protecting this area here. But as it gets further away, they're looking at preventing anyone winning a clean header in this area, and they're saying, right, the goalkeeper is responsible for this large area here, giving them lots of space to go and attack the ball, meet it. These players can drop in, but they can now pick up the run from the blue player here, from the Leicester player driving in. They can pick that run up, meet with it and move in with it, and then go for the challenge themselves. This second group of players here, there are 3 against 4, because your number 10 here is responsible for anything being played short, for anything played into this area. So you have 3 players, bit of blocking, bit of marking. Ultimately, one of these players is not actually marked, but you've got these players covering the zones, and they're doing this mixture of marking and zonal, which they feel will make it very difficult for an opponent to one, find any space, any key space anyway, and 2, get a free run on them. You can see then that there are pros and cons to both, and like we looked at the quotes at the start, Carragher's point is that if you concede a goal in a zonal system, we blame the system. If you concede a goal in man-to-man marking, we blame an individual player, and that kind of lets everyone else off. So it's this idea that you're a collective, you're a unit, and you can see that if it's perfected and worked on, it can work really well, and the stats show that, which I'll come on to in a second. But I can also understand Gary Neville's point of view, in that if you have not got time to train on the training ground and perfect it, then a poor zonal system could be worse than man-to-man marking, even if you're not great in the air, just by the mere fact that players get it wrong and an opponent gets a run on them. If you're a technical possession-based side, not that physical, you might favour zonal marking. It could really work for you, like with Guardiola at Barcelona especially, but also at City. If you're a physical direct playing side and the players, several players are really strong in the air, they like the battle, you might say, you know what, our players, our personnel really suit man-to-man marking. It really works for us marking. It can also depend on your goalkeeper. So if you've got a goalkeeper who just dominates their box, then they're going to want as much space just to come and get that ball as they can. So you either adapt your zones where you give the keeper lots of space around the 6-yard box, or with the man-to-man, you say if they come into the 6-yard box, you leave them there and leave it to the keeper, don't get in the goalkeeper's way. The stats show that in the English game, at least, over the years, more teams have favoured man-to-man marking. But as there's been an influx of foreign coaches and players over the years, that has changed a fair bit. So there's now quite a few teams that favour zonal marking, particularly at the top level anyway in the Premier. But when you actually look at the stats, you look into it, you find that the amount of goals conceded by the two systems is very similar. More people are using man-to-man marking, but percentage-wise of that is same in terms of goals conceded as it is for those teams using zonal marking. So all in all, look at your players, the physical, the social, the mental, the tactical, the technical makeup of your players that are out for the team that day. Consider the amount of time you have on the training ground to perfect something if you're doing zonal, and consider the opponents as well, what's going to suit you dealing with corners against them. So that was looking at zonal versus man-to-man marking. I'd like to know which one you think is best. Do let us know, and if you have any reasons for that as well. I think from looking into it myself here, I've found I'm quite open-minded on it. I've used both systems, both man-to-man and zonal, whilst I've been coaching aside. I generally find there is more mistrust of zonal marking, certainly in England anyway. There's a real mistrust of it. There's this feeling, this narrative that you'll get caught out by it, and the team will get the run on you. But like I say, the stats at the top level don't show that. Perhaps if you had stats at grassroots level, maybe it would show man-to-man is better because the players buy into it and they have less time on the training ground to work at doing something like a really good zonal system. It's a really interesting topic, and one that will always cause debate, I'm sure, and it will continue to do so with people like Carragher and Gary Neville on Sky. That's it for now though, and back to the tactics board. Hope to see you next time. Thank you.